Get down! You trying to die? Luke Carver barked it on pure reflex as he yanked Hannah off the wagon seat and down behind the boulder, just as the first shots split the air. It was the voice of a man shaped by battle, by years of staying alive, by being half a second faster than whoever was aiming at him. But when Hannah didn't react, didn't scream, just lay there on the ground with her eyes wide open and her fingers clawing into the dirt hard enough to break the skin, he realized he had just dragged her straight back into an old nightmare. Out here between Cinder Creek and Raven Pass, people like to think a man only needed a heart of steel. That afternoon, Luke was about to learn there was something else that could save a life. Something small and quiet. A voice lowered and a touch held gentle when everything else was trying to explode. That morning, Cinder Creek had been peaceful. The train rolled in with a hiss of steam, carrying road dust from the east. Hannah Price stepped down from the car, one hand gripping an old nurse's bag, her shoulders drawn in out of habit. The station was nothing much, just a wooden overhang and a couple of benches. But to her, any place with rails and whistles meant hope. If you could ride in, you could always ride out again. Sheriff Hale was already waiting on the platform, round in the middle, silver star on his vest dulled by dust. He lifted a hand when he saw her. "Miss Price, is that you?" he asked, voice low and kindly. "From the Midland Infirmary?" "Yes, Sheriff," Hannah answered, trying to smile. "The station at Raven Pass sent a wire. They said there's sickness spreading in the mining camp, and one difficult birth. They need someone who knows what she's doing." The sheriff nodded. "They do. And the road from here up there needs somebody who knows a gun." He turned toward the hitching rail. "Carver!" The man leaning on the fence raised his head. He was tall, broad-shouldered, coat dusty, hat pulled low. His face was sun-dark, every line sharp as if carved in wood with a knife. What stuck most was his eyes, quiet, a little cold. The eyes of a man who had seen more than anyone ought to. At his hip sat a plain revolver, riding easy in its holster, no shine, no pretty work. "This is Hannah Price," the sheriff said. "Nurse. You take her up to Raven Pass, stay till the doctor says she's finished, then bring her back. I don't want her riding that stretch alone." Luke just dipped his chin. "Wagon's ready," he said. "If Miss Price is set, we should go. If the wind kicks up, that pass road gets ugly in a hurry." Hannah's gaze flicked over him, then down to the gun. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her bag. I'm not used to traveling with a man who wears a gun that casually," she blurted, then heard how sharp it sounded and added, "But I know I don't have much choice." "My gun isn't casual," Luke said, not angry, just blunt. "It's either in the holster or it's firing. I don't wave it around for fun. You do your job, I'll do mine. Just don't step into the road when I tell you to stay back, and we'll be fine." It was a rough way to speak, but it sounded a little like a promise, too. Hannah drew a breath and reminded herself why she had come. Sick men, a laboring woman, fevers, groans. One woman's fear could not be bigger than a whole camp in need. The small wagon rattled out of town, iron rims grinding over the dirt. Hannah sat on the seat beside the driver, Luke riding his horse along the side, keeping far enough out to watch both ahead and behind. Cinder Creek shrank behind them. Houses fell away, giving way to thin grass and the first cuts of Stone Canyon. "How long you been a nurse?" Luke asked, voice just loud enough to reach her over the wheels. "Almost 10 years, Hannah said. "I started at a rail station, then moved over to the mining infirmary. I'm good at stopping bleeding, breaking fevers, keeping patients calm. She stopped, bit her lip, left the rest unsaid. Just don't like gunfire." Luke finished for her, eyes still on the road. "Sheriff told me." Hannah turned her head, a little embarrassed. "He told you all that?" "He told me enough so I'd know you're not the kind that sticks her head up to see where the shots are coming from," Luke said with a small shrug. "Which suits me fine. I don't like the people riding with me dying because they're curious." It sounded cold, but Hannah heard something bent and rough-edged in it that wasn't quite unkind. She let out a slow breath and looked off toward the horizon. "I got caught in a shooting at a saloon once," she said quietly, like offering a bargain. "I was wrapping a boy's hand when a gun went off behind me. My friend dropped right in front of me. Since then, whenever a shot goes off too close, my body stops listening. I can still work, as long as nobody yanks me or yells at me at the same time." Luke was silent a long while. The wind brought the dry smell of grass. At last he said, "I'll do my best not to shout. I can't promise the guns will stay quiet. This trail's got a few fools who think firing into the air is a joke." "You don't have to promise," Hannah said, eyes back on the road. "Just, if you have to pull me, pull gentle." He didn't turn, but his hand tightened slightly on the reins. "I heard you," he said. The sun dropped lower. The road to Raven Pass narrowed between two walls of rock, shadows stretching long. The feel of the air changed, quiet in a way that made a man's skin prickle. Luke's brow creased as his gaze swept the edges of the stone and brush. "Sit a little lower," he told her. "This stretch draws men who think they're smarter than the law." Hannah did as he said, heart speeding up, working to keep her breathing even. She hugged her medical bag to her side and shut her eyes for a moment. "It's only the road," she told herself. "Only the wind." But it did not take long for the wind to bring something else with it. Far ahead, a burst of high laughter from a pack of young men, then the clink of metal. Luke heard the first click of a hammer drawing back before Hannah knew anything was wrong. A man's shape rose up on the rock outcrop ahead, gun barrel swinging down. "Perfect," Luke muttered, eyes going hard. Then it all happened fast, the way it always had in his life. "Get down! You trying to die?" he roared, his hand clamping on Hannah's shoulder as he dragged her off the wagon seat and down behind the wheel just as the first bullets screamed through the air. The second shot ripped across the air above the rock. Loose dirt pattered down on Hannah's back. She did not scream. She did not gasp. Her body simply shut off. Her eyes were wide, locked on the bit of ground right in front of her, and her fingers clawed into the sandy gravel until her nails started to bleed. The smell of gunpowder, sweat, horsehide, the shouts and curses, all of it blended into one dull roar in her ears. In her mind, the old saloon scene flared up like a burned-through strip of film. The boy on the chair with his hand wrapped in bandages, the sudden cut-off of laughter, the gun going off right behind her head, her friend dropping in front of her, blood splattering across a white apron. There had been a hand then too, yanking her down to the floor, a man's voice screaming in her ear, "Stay down if you want to live." Now the hand on her shoulder was Luke's. The pull had been quick, strong, precise, and his voice was the same kind of battlefield bark. "Get down! You trying to die?" Luke pressed his back to the rock, gun already settled into his hand, eyes cutting up to the rim where the shapes had popped up. He picked out rough laughter, somebody swearing, the clumsy sound of hammers being pulled back. Drunk young bucks, he guessed, the kind that thought firing over the road made them important. "Stay flat," he snapped out of habit. "Don't you lift your head. Let me." He glanced down, meaning to haul her closer to cover her with his body. What he saw stopped him in mid-reach. Hannah wasn't blinking. Her lips had gone bluish. Her chest barely rose. Her fingers were buried in the dirt like she was trying to hold on to the earth itself so no one could drag her away. This was not ordinary fear. This was frozen terror, deep enough that her body had quit answering its own orders. Luke had seen those eyes before, not in men who were running, but in men who never got as far as running. Years back, he had pulled a green-faced kid out of a line of fire, shouted himself hoarse, and the boy had still lain there like stone, fingers dug into the ground just like this. The boy hadn't died because a bullet found him. He died because when it was time to move, he could not make himself stand up. Part of Luke wanted to grab Hannah and shake her until she snapped out of it. That was the Ironheart part of him, the part that had learned the hard way that half a second slow could kill you. But another part, smaller and quieter, spoke up, told him if he did that, he would only shove her deeper into the nightmare she was already drowning in. The hand gripping her shoulder eased. He shifted down to her wrist, set his fingers there very lightly on skin gone cold, not squeezing. "Hannah," he said, using her name for the first time, his voice dropping to half its former force. "Listen to me. The bullets aren't hitting this rock. They're shooting wild. Look at me, not the ground." She didn't turn her head, but her eyelids fluttered. Luke leaned closer, close enough that his words could push through the echo of gunfire. "Breathe," he said slowly. "In. 1, 2, 3. Out. 1, 2, 3. Just like that. I'm right here. If anybody gets shot, it'll be me, not you." Another shot cracked. She jerked, but because his hand was resting so lightly on her wrist, the reaction came out as a small shiver instead of a full-body jolt. He felt it. "That's it," he murmured. "Again. And out." After a few rounds of that, her shoulders dropped a fraction. She swallowed hard and finally forced a few words out. "They're so close." "Not as close as I am," Luke answered, one corner of his mouth twitching even though the danger was still there. "Now you stay right here. I'm going to lift my head. You do not lift yours. Understand?" She blinked. It wasn't a clear nod, but it was enough for him. He released her wrist and drew his hand back, slow, like he was afraid of snapping a line that had just been tied. He tipped his hat up and eased the brim out past the edge of the rock first. A bullet smacked into the rim with a sharp crack. Luke counted under his breath. 3 of them. 2 decent guns, 1 old junker. Drunk, he decided. He rose just fast enough to sight and fired twice. One of his bullets shattered the rock less than a hand's breadth from the nearest man's fingers. The other shot knocked the hat clean off the second one's head. "That's enough fun for one day," he shouted, this time forcing his voice to stay level instead of sliding into that hard battle tone. "This road belongs to the sheriff of Cinder Creek. You want to keep drinking tonight, you get off it. Next time I see you out here, you won't just lose your hats." There were more curses, one last wild shot, then the heavy, stumbling sound of boots retreating. Luke waited a few heartbeats, listening. When he was sure there was nothing left but the wind, he let himself exhale, feeling the heat in his chest ease. He turned back to Hannah. She was still pressed close to the ground, but her fingers were no longer buried deep in the dirt. They trembled now, small quivers like after a long chill. Luke reached his hand towards her and stopped halfway. This time he did not rush the touch. "Hannah, he said softly. It's over. They're gone. Can I put my hands on you? Just to help you sit up. It took several seconds before she turned her head to him. The nightmare still sat in her eyes, but there was a thin line of present time in there now too. She gave the smallest nod. Luke set his hand on her elbow, gentle and firm. Slow, he told her. Sit up easy. Nobody's yelling at you now. She pushed herself up, back braced against the rock. He saw the small smears of red on her fingertips where her nails had dug in. He pulled out a clean handkerchief and held it where she could see it, pausing. Let me wrap those for you? He asked. Yes, she whispered. This time, when his fingers touched her hand, the contact was so careful, it surprised even him. With other people, he was always quick and efficient, the same way he cleaned his gun. With her, he moved slowly, wiping every bit of dirt away, wrapping the cloth around each scraped finger and tying the knot with care. I'm sorry, he said suddenly, as he finished the last knot. I shouldn't have yelled like that. Old habits. I forgot you weren't on a battlefield with me. Hannah looked up at him, startled to hear the word sorry come out of the mouth of a man folks called iron-hearted. She took a long breath, feeling her chest finally start to follow her orders again. If you have to pull me next time, she said quietly, then pull me, just tell me first, or touch me like you did just now. All right, Luke said, short and plain. My heart can stay made of steel if it has to, but these hands... He flexed his fingers once. I can teach them to soften up. Won't kill me to try. They sat still a while after the last of the footsteps faded. Wind slid through the pass, carrying dust and the bitter trace of gun smoke. Hannah felt as if her body had just run a long distance, even though she had not moved at all. Her heart was still beating fast, but not with the wild, broken rhythm of a few minutes before. We should move on, Luke said, his eyes still scanning the ridges. Not because I am afraid they will come back, just because I do not like staying long in places where fools have been shooting. He stood first and reached out his hand. This time, instead of yanking, he let it hang there between them, steady and patient, the way a man offers a rein to a skittish horse. You all right to stand? He asked. If you are not ready, we can sit here a while longer. Hannah looked at the hand. A few hours ago, she would have read it as an order. Now it felt like an invitation. She set her palm in his and used her own strength to pull herself up. He only steadied her. No pulling, no squeezing. The wagon was still there, only a board chipped along the side. The driver's face was the color of chalk. Those devils, he stammered. It is over, Luke cut in, then glanced at Hannah. We keep going, but we will not make Raven Pass before dark. There is an old chapel a few miles on. We'll sleep there and ride the last stretch in the morning. Hannah nodded. The thought of a night on the open pass after a day like this made her skin crawl. An old chapel, even empty, sounded better. Something of earth and of God, even if she had not been much of a churchgoer. The road ahead was quiet again. The sun slid toward the horizon, the light turning to warm honey. Mountain shadows stretched long, covering most of the trail. Hannah took her place once more on the wagon seat, holding her bag. Every so often she glanced left, where Luke rode beside them. He sat the saddle without thinking about it, back straight, easy in the way of a man who had been on a horse more hours than on his own 2 feet. How long have you been doing this? She asked, her voice steadier now. Doing what? He said. Guard duty? or knocking hats off folks' heads? Both, she answered, the corner of her mouth twitching. He thought about it. I have had a gun in my hand since I was 16, he said. At first it was for rabbits. Later it was for things that did not act as kindly as rabbits. War taught me hands that do not shake tend to live longer. As for escort work, I do it because the sheriff needs somebody who knows the trail. I do not especially enjoy getting shot at in place of someone else, but I hate seeing harmless people travel alone a whole lot more. Hannah was quiet, turning that over. Sounds like a man with an iron heart, she said softly. An iron heart rusts in places, Luke replied without a smile. Today, when you were flat on the ground like stone, I remembered a young soldier. I dragged him just like I dragged you, yelled at him the same way. He did not move. No bullet hit him square, but one hit close enough that he never got up again. Ever since then, every time I shout at somebody under gunfire, I see his face. Hannah turned to look at him a bit longer. In that even matter-of-fact voice, there was nothing of boasting, only the sound of a small confession no one had required him to make. You did not kill him, she said. The war did. Maybe, Luke shrugged. But if that day I had touched lighter, spoken lower, maybe he would have calmed his breath, stood when he had to. I do not know. I only know this much. If I had done the same thing again today, you might have broken. She bit her lip, feeling her throat tighten, not from fear this time, but from the strange ache of being seen. Thank you, she said simply, for stopping your hand. The chapel showed up just as the light shrank to a narrow strip. It was a small wooden building with a steep roof, front door once painted white now peeling, a rusty iron cross still fixed above it. The door was not locked, just pulled to. Inside it was empty but for a few narrow pews and a film of dust on the altar shelf. Preacher left a long time ago, Luke explained as he lit a small oil lamp. Folks pray in town these days. This place turned into a storm shelter for whoever happens by. Hannah sat on a middle bench, rubbing the bandages on her fingers. Her back still ached, but her head had stopped spinning. Luke tied the horses under the eaves, then gathered some dry wood and woke up the old iron stove in the corner. When the shots went off, she said, studying the wooden ceiling, I knew I should not overreact. Knew everything you were saying made sense, but my body, it just went its own way. I saw that, Luke answered. He sat on the bench beside her, keeping a decent gap between them. I am not much better when somebody bangs on a door in the middle of the night. I come off that bed with my hand on the gun before my head remembers where I am. Everybody's got something that kicks them out of their chair. You are afraid of knocking? Hannah asked, surprised. I'm afraid of not knowing what stands on the other side, he corrected. But I did have somebody teach me once that not every door that flies open brings war with it. Hannah tilted her head. Who taught you that? Years back I spent the night at a widow's place outside Clay Ridge, he said. Storm rolled in, wind was high, the window banging like the devil. I came out of sleep with my gun half drawn, ready to shoot the first shape in the doorway. Turned out to be her 10-year-old boy, clutching a blanket, scared of the thunder. He stood there shaking, staring at me like I was some kind of monster. His mama just reached over and pushed my gun down and said, Not every door that opens is a war, Mr. Carver. You just reminded me of that. Hannah let out a thin, real laugh. And not every gunshot is the same, she added. Some are to scare, some are to kill, and some are to keep somebody from a slower kind of dying. They fell quiet, listening to the little fire crackle. Outside, wind whistled along the roof, but inside, the old chapel seemed to wrap around them like a worn blanket. Hannah pulled her coat close, suddenly feeling the cold now that the rush of fear had drained away. Luke glanced over. "I'm about to do something else that might count as soft," he said, half teasing, half serious. "I'm going to hang my coat over this bench. If you want it, you take it. If you do not, you leave it there. I'm done throwing it across your shoulders. I do not need your heart jumping out of your chest again." He stood, hung his coat over the back of the bench between them, and sat back down. Hannah looked at it for a moment, hesitated, then reached out, pulled it down, and settled it around herself. "Maybe," she said slowly, "my heart needs to learn how to beat again with gunshots still in the distance. And your hands? You keep letting them stay as soft as they were today. We will split the work." Luke nodded, a rare glint of something easier in his eyes. "Deal," he said. "Tomorrow we ride into Raven Pass. It will be loud, there will be shouting, maybe shooting again. I will be behind you, and if I have to touch you, I will keep it light. If you feel my hand get hard, you remind me." "I will," Hannah answered. "Because it seems even an iron heart will listen if you speak to it at the right time." The next morning, they left the little chapel while the mist was still clinging to the edges of the rocks. The road up to Raven Pass was steeper now, but quiet. Hannah felt every hoofbeat clearly, like steady counts leading her into a new day. The mining camp was nothing pretty. Low wooden shacks lined the slope, thin smoke leaking from a few crooked chimneys, the smell of coal mixed with soup and sweat. Off to one side stood a small building with a rough plank sign that read "Clinic." More men were outside than inside, some doubled over in coughing fits, some clutching their bellies, others curled on stretchers on the ground. "Welcome to Raven Pass," Luke said dryly. "Not the finest spot in the West, but it is the only one around here that has a doctor." The doctor, a lean man with graying hair and dark hollows under his eyes, hurried out when he saw them. "Miss Price?" he asked, voice ragged. "Thank the Lord, you finally made it. I am nearly out of hands and out of medicine." Hannah did not bother with many words. She just nodded and held up her bag. When the work stood clear in front of her, fear dropped to second place. She knew this world. Feverish men, hacking coughs, half-coherent mumbling. She washed her hands, rolled up her sleeves, and went to work dividing pills, taking temperatures, changing dressings. All morning long, her voice moved steadily through the room, calming patients, asking questions just loud enough to hear. Luke stayed in the clinic doorway for a little while, then drifted out under the overhang. His work was not at the bedside. It was outside, keeping an eye on the drunks who wandered too close, making sure the yard did not turn to chaos. Every so often he glanced inside and saw Hannah moving from cot to cot, hair tied back neatly, hands sure and steady. Looking at her there, it was hard to believe that just yesterday she had frozen solid in a cloud of gun smoke. By noon, the heat pressed down. Near the tool shed, a knot of miners gathered, arguing over water rations. Voices climbed higher and sharper until a single sharp crack cut through the noise. A gunshot fired into the air by the foreman to shut them up. The sound snapped across the yard, echoing straight into the clinic. Hannah was bent over the wrist of a laboring woman, checking her pulse. Her hand stiffened on the spot. For one instant, her ears filled with a dull roar. Her heart shot into her throat, and her gaze started to tear away from the woman's face, chasing after old memories instead. Right then, Luke stepped into the doorway. He did not rush in or yank her away from the bed. He simply came up behind her and set his hand on her shoulder, light and clear. No pressure. "Just a warning shot," he said near her ear, quiet enough that the patient could not hear. "Nobody is dying in this room. The person who needs you is right in front of you. Look at her, not out there." His voice did not bark orders this time. It sounded more like a line thrown across two posts to hold them steady. Hannah swallowed and brought her eyes back to the woman's face, twisted with the pain of a contraction. She could feel his hand on her shoulder, not forcing, just giving her a point to lean against. "You are all right," she told the woman, and this time her voice did not crack. "Breathe deep with me, in and out. It hurts, but we are still in control." The contraction eased, and the woman sagged back a little. Outside, the shouting had already faded. Only the wind and a distant curse or two were left. Luke's hand left Hannah's shoulder slowly, as if he were afraid that pulling away too fast might throw her off balance. "You did good," he said under his breath. "Your heart was pounding, but your hands did not walk away." Hannah looked up, surprised he could hear her breathing the way he did. "If you had not put your hand there," she admitted, "I think I might have walked outside or gone still again. In that case, the doctor will just have to accept that I am his assistant in charge of keeping the nurse's hands where they belong," Luke said with a small shrug. "Could be worse." By late afternoon, the whole camp was worn thin. A feverish child finally cooled down. The laboring woman at last brought a slick, red little baby into the world, its cry tearing through the heavy air. Hannah lifted the infant, wiped it clean, wrapped it in a blanket. Sweat had dried in streaks on her cheeks, and there were shadows under her eyes. But in them, Luke saw a light he had not seen since the day he met her. "It's okay, I owe you more than a day's pay," the doctor told her, gripping her hand. "If you want it, Raven Pass will always have a place for a nurse like you. But I hear Cinder Creek is short on help for their new clinic too." Hannah glanced toward the door, where Luke was leaning against the frame, hat low, one hand rubbing his horse's neck. He looked up and caught her gaze, lifting his brows just a little as if to ask, "You all right?" "I will go back to Cinder Creek first," she said, turning back to the doctor. "After that, I will decide where to stay. Today I learned something. I need to choose a place where my heart does not tighten every time a gun goes off." That night, they slept in an empty room off the clinic. Hannah was so tired that she slipped under almost as soon as she lay down. But just before her eyes closed, she felt Luke pull the blanket up over her shoulder, his hands moving as slowly as every touch since the day before. "We will head back at first light," he said quietly. "The road home will be quieter. You have given this place what it needed. Now it is Cinder Creek's turn, and maybe your own." In the dark, she did not answer aloud, but her fingers found the edge of the blanket he had just straightened and held on, as if holding a new line tied into her life. Somewhere outside, a lone shot cracked in the night, then faded. This time, it did not tear her out of her sleep. They left Raven Pass while the morning was still gray with mist. The mining camp dropped away behind them, shrinking to the faint clink of picks and a few ragged coughs. The road back to Cinder Creek sloped downward now, easier than the climb up. Hannah sat on the wagon seat with her hand resting on her medical bag, feeling bone-tired but clearer in her head. Inside, that tiredness was something else she hadn't felt in a long time. A quiet sense that this time, she hadn't run. Luke rode alongside, silent for most of the way. Every now and then he glanced over, just to be sure she was still sitting upright and not sagging from fever or exhaustion. Each time he saw her lift a hand and rub the spot on her shoulder where he'd laid his hand the day before, he turned his head away, pretending to be very occupied with the scrub trees along the trail. Near the bend, where the road looked down into the valley of Cinder Creek, they caught up with a freight wagon. The driver snapped the lines and changed to a rougher gait, the whip cracking across the team's backs with a sharp smack. The sound made the horse hitched to Hannah's wagon toss its head. Then the front wheel of the freight wagon slammed into a rock with a hollow boom, loud and sudden, like an old gun going off. Hannah flinched. Her heart jumped. For half a beat, her body reached for the old pattern, curling in, holding her breath, eyes looking for a place to hide. But before that reflex could close over her completely, she heard Luke's voice. Not barking this time, just calm and even. "Not a gun," he said. "That's just Ben's damn fool wheel hitting a rock. Breathe, Price. 3 counts like last night." His hand settled around her wrist in that now familiar way that almost made her laugh. His fingers didn't squeeze, they just marked the place. Hannah pulled a breath in, counting in her head, 1, 2, 3. Let it out, 1, 2, 3. Her chest was still tight, but it didn't slam shut the way it used to. She turned her head and looked at him, catching the faintest lift at the corner of his mouth. "Your heart's not ice anymore," he said. "Just still a little cold. We're doing fine." "You're doing fine," she corrected softly. "I'm just trying not to ruin your work." "My job now is getting you home in one piece," Luke replied, voice dry but eyes not as cold as that first day. "My hands take care of the steel. Yours take care of the softness. That's enough." Cinder Creek opened up below them, a scatter of wooden roofs, chimneys, and dusty streets. When the wagon rattled down the main drag, Sheriff Hale was already on the office steps. He raised a hand in greeting, his gaze running over both of them. "Both of you still in one piece, good," he said. "How's Raven Pass?" "Better than it was last night," Hannah answered before Luke could. "A few folks will live a while longer. One baby just started living at all. I expect the doctor's going to sleep a whole day if they let him." The sheriff nodded, then turned to Luke. "Any trouble on the road?" "Couple drunk boys shooting wild," Luke said shortly. "Cost me a few rounds and one idiot's hat. Not worth the ink for a report." Sheriff Hale's eyes flicked to the white bandage on Hannah's hand, then to the look that passed between the two of them. He let the hint of a smile curve his mouth, but didn't pry. "Cinder Creek still needs a nurse," he said to Hannah. "New clinic's open, and there's an empty bed in the back if you're tired of riding trains. We can pay enough to make it worth staying put." Hannah looked around. The town was small, not handsome, but the sound of voices lay at just the right distance, not too close, not too far. From the cafe porch drifted the smell of fresh bread. From the blacksmith's came the steady ring of hammer on iron. And from the direction of the hitching rail, she could hear Luke taking off his saddle and hear his words from last night echo in her mind. "Pick a place where your heart doesn't seize up every time a gun goes off." "I'll stay," she said, almost before she had time to think it through. "At least for a while. If you don't change your mind, Sheriff." "You say it out loud. That makes it official," Hale chuckled. "Cinder Creek doesn't let good folks slip away twice." By late afternoon, the little town clinic had been straightened up, an extra bed set in place, windows washed until they let in more light. Hannah hung her coat on a peg by the door and tucked her medical bag into a cupboard. when everything looked as settled as it was going to get. She stood in the doorway and looked out at the street. Luke was leaning against the porch post, coffee cup in hand, as if he'd just happened to wander by. "So you didn't choose Raven Pass," he said. "I decided I've had enough of saloons where people shoot each other," she answered. "I'm choosing a place where, if somebody fires into the air, there's at least one person around who'll remind me to breathe." He dipped his head. "If there comes a day my hand gets hard again," he said, half joking, half true, "you go ahead and tell me. Don't let me forget this is not the war." "All right," she said, "because it seems even an iron heart needs somebody to tap it now and then, so it remembers where it is." A light wind moved down the street, kicking up a soft veil of dust. Hannah held her hand out, not for him to drag her anywhere, but for him to take if he wanted. Luke looked at that hand for a moment, then set his own in it, closing his fingers just enough to be felt. The touch was so gentle that anyone watching from a distance might have thought they were just passing something back and forth. But for them, it was a small promise that he would remember to ease up when she shook, and that she would remind him that not everything in front of him needed steel. In Cinder Creek, folks still told stories about Luke Carver, the cowboy with the iron heart and the steady hand. But if you lingered a little longer in the cafe, you'd hear the rest of it. That sometimes the ones who look coldest are the slow, careful students of a different lesson. That there are fears so deep and so chilled that a gun can't touch them. And that in those moments, the only thing that can gentle them is not a shout, but a very quiet hand resting on your wrist. In Cinder Creek, folks still talk about Luke Carver the way they always did, as a man with hard hands, cool eyes, and a gun that never shook. They don't often mention that afternoon on the pass between Cinder Creek and Raven Pass, where a single shot turned a nurse to stone in the dust and rock, and where an iron-hearted cowboy first learned how to loosen his grip. Not many know that in the little clinic at the end of the street, there are nights when Hannah Price still startles at a sound by the door, and that every time it happens, instead of reaching for his gun, Luke just lays his hand very softly on her wrist and reminds her, it's not a war, it's only the wind. The West didn't suddenly turn gentle and guns didn't vanish from the valley. But for those two, the coldest kind of fear finally found something that could ease it. Not steel, but a soft touch at the right moment, from a heart that thought it had forgotten how to stir. If the journey of Hannah and Luke, from that shout behind the rock to that light touch on the wrist, has made your own heart soften just a little tonight, go ahead and hit subscribe so we can keep sitting together with more quiet Western love stories like this. Don't forget to like the video, leave a comment about the moment that stayed with you most, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next episodes from Tales from the Wild West.